Good morning. This legislative hearing on H.R. 1288, H.R. 1494, H.R. 1623, H.R. 1809, H.R. 2086, H.R. 2138, H.R. 2189, H.R. 2341, H.R. 2382, and H.R. 2423 will now come to order. Today, we have a large number of bills before us, and there is a high level of interest in the policy areas that they address, particularly the backlog of disability benefits claims. Therefore, in the interest of time, I will forego a lengthy opening statement and just briefly touch upon one bill on today's agenda, which I am the author of, H.R. 2423. Disabled Veterans Access to Medical Examinations Improvement Act has three main objectives. First, the bill would extend the authority of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to enter into contracts with private physicians to conduct medical disability evaluations. With the passage of this bill, the successful program allowing physicians outside of the VA to conduct contract examinations would continue for an additional 3 years through 2016. This would allow VA more quickly to evaluate the veteran's disability and facilitate access to the care they need. Second, this bill would also extend the license portability to contract examination providers, meaning that physicians with an active state license may provide C&P examinations in another state because they are working on behalf of the federal government. Although the VA and DoD already provide license portability for physicians working directly for them, this authority is not extended to contract examination providers. This provision is designed to facilitate the C&P exam process by allowing the contract physicians the flexibility to travel and assist in areas that are experiencing lengthy delays in scheduling examinations. Finally, this piece of legislation would also expand the number of regional offices allowed to utilize contract examinations from 10 to 15. In addition, this would require the Secretary to determine which regional offices would benefit most from the use of the contract examinations by performing data analysis of the backlog and disability examination wait times. C&P examinations are a key component of the disability claims process. Therefore, expanding the authority and scope of the contract examination process it is my hope that the veterans can more quickly receive the necessary medical evidence for their claim. This will cut down the overall development and processing time, resulting in faster issuance of a final decision. Again, in the interest of time, I would like to reiterate my request that today's witness abide by the decorum and the rules of this hearing and summarize your statement in 5 minutes or less during their oral testimony. We have a large number of bills on the agenda today, and I want to make sure everybody is heard in a timely manner. Would also remind everybody present and without any objection, your written testimony will be made part of the hearing record. I appreciate everyone's attendance, and now call on the ranking member, Ms. Titus, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late, and I'll follow your example. I also want to thank you for your continued leadership in these issues facing our veterans, and thank you for this hearing. We do have a number of bills. I would just highlight a couple that are addressing the backlog, which we've heard so much about from my colleagues who are present today. On the agenda is H.R. 1623, which is the VA Claims Efficiency Through Information Act of 2013. This is brought to us by Representative McLeod of the DAMA Subcommittee. H.R. 1623 requires the VA to track time that's spent evaluating each type of medical condition in a veteran's disability claim and the performance of each regional office in handling those claims. Information is always key, and it gives us strength in making better policy. So understanding which medical conditions consume the most time to process will help us understand the agency's backlog and then shape procedures that can help expedite the progress of a claim. It would also ensure that the VBA builds in detailed measures which will ultimately lead to gains in efficiency, again, for better understanding and addressing the backlog. Next, we have H.R. 1809, known as the Faster Filing Act. This is proposed by Representative O'Rourke, also of the DAMA Subcommittee. This bill would help encourage and educate veterans about the various methods that may increase the timeliness of their claims, such as utilizing the new fully developed claims program. The fully developed claims program will not only help reduce the backlog significantly, but it will also allow veterans to do their claims in appropriate time period and then get an extra year of benefits as an incentive. So this will encourage veterans to utilize the approach that gets them through faster. Finally, my own bill, H.R. 2086, the pay-as-you-rate bill, would require the VA to pay for medical conditions as they're adjudicated in the electronic system. Currently, veterans typically receive payment when all the medical conditions within a claim are fully addressed and adjudicated. This legislation would pay as you rate. It would require the VA to pay veterans on individual medical conditions as each one is adjudicated. So you'd get paid at a faster rate and at least get a little bit of money before you have to go through the whole process. We know that veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan average 8.5 different conditions in their claims. Some of these are complex and time-consuming, but some are simpler and can be addressed in a more timely fashion. We believe the VA should compensate veterans for these simpler parts of their claim as early as possible while continuing to work on the more difficult ones. These just seem like common sense approaches, and I hope, Mr. Chairman, working together, we can move these bills to the floor as quickly as possible. We all are concerned about the backlog. We want to get rid of all those mountains of paper, have a more efficient, effective system, and help our RAs address our veterans' claims as quickly as possible, because that's what they deserve. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady, and I know I think pretty much every member in the room wants to speak on a bill, so we'll get this moving. I'll yield to Chairman Miller for his statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I too will make my statement as brief as possible. H.R. 2189 established a commission or a task force basically to handle, hopefully, the issue as it relates to the disability claims backlog. And I think everybody in this room is very familiar that VA has, in fact, brainstormed over recent weeks trying to get a handle on the claims that are out there today. And I do hope, as well as each member of this committee, that, in fact, their efforts are successful. But I think the pattern that we've seen of starting new initiative after new initiative after new initiative is just not really the way to handle the situation that is presented before us right now. I think what we need is an outside independent analysis to clearly identify first why the backlog exists, and even as important, if not more so, to prevent the backlog from ever occurring again. If we don't know where we've been, how are we going to get where we're going, so to say? And so I would say that by assembling this team, it would help work towards VA's goal in a fresh and renewed pattern, if possible. Recommendations would be made in performing the review. It would be a non-adversarial position as the way that the claims process would be underscored. Team members would be appointed by Congress, the President, be represented by folks from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I would say that they would pull a perspective from the veteran service organizations community as well as private sector leaders in their fields of expertise, including claims processing, logistics, and product tracking. Finally, the bill would require a report to the on the group's progress, and then a final report being done 180 days within final implementation of this particular law. And I've heard some people say that this is unnecessary. I would just say it's an opportunity, really. It's not unnecessary. It's not going to be a delay tactic by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, VA has made some progress on the backlog out there. We've all heard about it, read about it in the news, but the overall processing times still remain well over the department's 2015 goal. Even with the improvement, VA has shown 65% of the claims that exist out there today are still in a backlog situation. So I think now is not the time to take the foot off the gas. We need to continue moving forward. I would say that this is not different from VA's recent decision to work claims that were pending in excess of 2 years. This was not originally a part of the VA plan. They did a course correction, and I think that it has produced some valuable time saving on those folks. I will say again, it would irritate me if I were a veteran that had a claim for 2 or 3 years pending, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, within 30 days, my claim was adjudicated. We need to find out why it sat there for so long. So, again, to my colleagues, I would encourage all of you to support H.R. 2189. It's a bill to establish a commission or task force to evaluate the backlog of disability claims at VA, and with that, I yield back.
I thank the chairman for that, and I'll recognize Ms. Naget McLeod for her statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Ryan and Ranking Member Titus. With your permission, I'd like to make a few remarks on H.R. 1623. Each year, as veterans apply for disability benefits through the VA, the number of medical conditions in their compensation claims increase. This is because more veterans are surviving war injuries and older veterans are having more health challenges as they age. A condition related to PTSD is very different than one related to hearing loss. Staff at the Veterans Benefit Administration do not always have the expertise with the very different conditions. Therefore, if any single medical condition in a claim is incorrectly evaluated, the entire claim is delayed from receiving a decision. This prevents the VA from processing claims in a timely manner and contributes to the backlog. The public has no information on how many claims include PSD, traumatic amputations from IEDs, or heart disease as medical conditions. The VA and Congress cannot sufficiently ensure that offices at the Veterans Benefits Administration have the knowledge base necessary to process disability claims unless this information is publicly available and regularly updated. The lack of public statistics about the claims backlog does the VA and veterans a disservice in demonstrating the progress being made and setting the VA on a path to reduce the number of outstanding claims. All that is seen at the VA's Monday morning workload report is a number of pending claims. No data showing the number of completed claims for the previous month or year is available, nor is the progress shown that is being made at the regional office during any month, a week, or a month or week. The VBA's recent efforts to reduce the claims backlog through clearing out the oldest cases is admirable, but this is not a long-term solution to providing veterans the compensation they earned while serving our country. H.R. 1623 is one part of the solution. It provides processing of claims by requiring VBA to track the time spent evaluating every medical condition in a disability compensation claim. It improves the efficiency of regional offices by requiring the VBA to report the monthly and weekly performance in processing claims. I applaud the VA's recent decision to move more information about the accuracy of rating disability claims and the average number of days a claim is pending at each of its regional offices. Beyond the requirements already enacted by the VA, H.R. 1623 would require the VA to report the number of completed claims by region and by medical condition for the current and preceding month and year. This information will be reported and updated weekly on its website. Each month, veterans suffer economic hardships from delays in their disability benefits. If we knew how many claims were completed from month to month and which offices were struggling to process particular medical conditions, the VA could quickly direct resources to address the problem, and Congress would have a better understanding how the VA allocates funding between regional offices, and that would assist them in receiving benefits to those who need it the most. Some concerns have been raised about how these reporting requirements create more work for the VA. However, all efforts for the veterans who serve our country should be taken. This bill has the support of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and the Association of the United States Navy. The bill's goal is to work with the VA and its employees, many of whom are veterans. We look forward to H.R. 1623 to be part of ending the claims backlog. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. With that, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 2382, the Prioritizing Urgent Claims for Veterans Act, gives priority status to claims submitted by veterans who are most in need of VA services. This bill requires the Department of Veterans Affairs to give priority status and process claims immediately when filed by veterans who meet any of the following conditions: veterans who have reached the age of 70, veterans who are terminally ill, or veterans with life-threatening illnesses. The intent of this legislation is to give priority to veterans who have urgent needs. And to the veterans in the military that are listening to this, it's almost analogous to combat situations when somebody who was wounded and medevaced. And when they are medevaced, they go to a casualty clearing station or a ship or what have you. They prioritize the triage system. And sometimes somebody who has, maybe shrapnel in the back or something like that, which is serious, but it's not a sucking chest wound, or somebody that is not missing their right arm or right leg or have head injuries. They have to make that decision. The system is backed up, and people that have served in Vietnam, Korea, even World War II, they're reaching that age where, and I'm one of them, where we have the impression that, hey, if it's going to take a year and a half, why bother? And if you're going to take care of us and those that have served in those situations, I think you have to have a priority of that. Somebody who's terminal, obviously that's very, very difficult to everybody. The services that would be rendered be much, much different. And of course, life-threatening illnesses. This is not designed to limit status to these three categories. In fact, we talked to the staff, actually looking for amendments that apply to veterans with good cause, but we want to ensure priority for these groups. I am looking forward to working with my colleagues in the DAV to identify other potential groups that would merit priority status before the markup. Until the claims backlog is resolved, I think we got to make it a priority to care for those veterans who are in need of those benefits they earned while serving their nation. And I especially want to thank Congresswoman Gloria Negrete-McLeod for co-sponsoring this important piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, gentlemen, and recognize Mr. O'Rourke now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to speak on the issue of resolving this problem that we have with disability claims backlog at the VBA, and H.R. 1809, or the Faster Filing Act, seeks to help resolve this problem. The veterans whom I serve in El Paso are waiting on average 480 days to have their claims resolved, and the regional office that is processing those claims is in Waco, Texas. Last week, I got to visit Waco, spend some time with the director, John Limpos, was joined by the Deputy Undersecretary for VBA, Diana Rubens, and we actually walked through this enormous facility that is processing all these claims for more than half the state of Texas, including El Paso. And it really struck home some of the problems that we have there. As we were turning a corner to go down another hallway, we were almost run over by a gentleman pushing a hand truck that had a stack of paperwork that was 4 or 5 feet high, and that was one veteran's claim. So it's clear that we have to do everything we can to help the VA transition into a digital format. It's going to make it far easier to resolve these claims, to process them, and to do so in a very effective, efficient manner, and in a way that's far more accurate than we're doing today. So the Faster Filing Act requires the VA to track and post the average turnaround time for the different manners in which a veteran can file a claim, from the fastest, which is a fully developed claim filed online, to the slowest, which is one that could perhaps be scrawled on the back of a napkin and submitted to the VA, which they would be required to accept and process. It also requires the VA to remind veterans that if they file a fully developed claim between August 6th of this year and August 6th of 2015, that veteran is entitled to an extra year's worth of benefits. So not only will they have their claim resolved more quickly than the traditional method, they can have that claim resolved in under 100 days versus 480 days on average for El Paso, but they'll get an extra year's worth of benefits. And we want to make sure and actually require through this bill that the VA publish that information, make it available to veterans as they're filing, help VSOs make that information available to veterans. It costs us nothing to do this. It enjoys bipartisan support. It makes a lot of common sense, and I want to thank Mr. Cook and the supporters that we have in the Senate, Senator Heinrich and Senator Heller, who joined us on a letter to the VA, asking the VA just to implement this bill without having to make it law, because it again seems like a common sense solution, something that should be easy enough for them to do, and something that doesn't cost any money. So hopefully we'll have the support of this committee, and if the VA does not act on the recommendations, we can make this law in the near future. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. And at this time, I'd like to welcome my colleagues from the House who are sitting at the witness table. And first, we hear from the Honorable G.K. Butterfield from North Carolina, who is sponsoring H.R. 1288. And then we'll hear from the Honorable Chris Gibson from New York, who is sponsoring H.R. 1494. And we're expecting the arrival of Honorable Kevin McCarthy from California, who is sponsoring 2138, who will be joining us following a prior commitment. Thank you all for accommodating the vote schedule, and I'd like to welcome you to this legislative hearing, and your complete and written statements will be entered into the hearing record. And with that, Congressman Butterfield, we will start with you, and you are now recognized for your statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member and other subcommittee members. Thank you so very much for allowing me the opportunity to testify today in support of my bill, H.R. 1288, the World War II Merchant Mariner Service Act. Seeing this bill signed into law is a personal priority, and I'm hopeful that this hearing signals that I am one step closer to achieving that goal on behalf of World War II merchant mariners. As this subcommittee certainly knows, ensuring that individuals who sacrificed so much in service to our country receive the recognition they deserve is one of the most important jobs that we may have as members of Congress. For the past three Congresses, I've led a strong bipartisan effort to recognize individuals that served our country during World War II in the Merchant Marine. In this Congress, I am again joined by a strong bipartisan coalition of, at present, 84 co-sponsors in support of this bill. 5 of the bill's co-sponsors are members of this committee, including full committee ranking member Mr. Michaud, and I thank each of them for their support. Passing this bill, Mr. Chairman, is the right thing to do, and now is the right time to do it. The bill is very simple. It would expand the types of documentation accepted by the federal government when a very small group of mariners that operated tugboats and barges domestically during the war apply for veteran status. Once they are recognized, Mr. Chairman, as a veteran, they would be provided benefits limited only to burial and a U.S. flag. And let me repeat that. Qualifying merchant mariners who can prove service through expanded acceptable documentation would receive only burial benefits and the honor of being recognized by their country for their sacrifice and service, period. My bill does not provide for health coverage or disability payments or payouts of any kind to merchant mariners who served during the war, and it does not impact direct spending. Currently, the required documents to satisfactorily prove service no longer exist, or it can be extremely hard to find. I've included documents in my submitted testimony that demonstrate that many of these necessary documents actually no longer exist, or they never existed. largely because of decisions by the government over several decades, and I ask now that they be included in the record. As a veteran of the U.S. Army myself, it is important to note that this bill takes nothing away from the men and women who have served and continue to serve our country in traditional ways. It does not diminish the importance of their sacrifices and does not reduce the esteem in which we all hold veterans of our traditional armed forces. These mariners have gone unrecognized, Mr. Chairman, for more than 70 years. They deserve to be recognized for their service because they too help to protect our great nation. My bipartisan bill has been scored by the CBO to have an insignificant and de minimis effect on direct spending over a 10-year period. Estimates show that fewer than 2,000 of these mariners are still living, less than 2,000. In fact, it's very possible that there are only hundreds left today. We are quickly running out of time to recognize these few remaining Americans that stood up for freedom and democracy when we needed them the most. Without weapons or formal training, these individuals risked their lives, and tragically too many gave their lives defending our country. For those that are still living, and there are some in my district, we must not let their efforts and contributions go unrecognized while we still have a chance to do it. Finally, in the passing of Senator Lautenberg from New Jersey, the last remaining World War II veteran in the Senate, this is a strong reminder to all of us in Congress that if we are to honor and recognize these mariners, the time to do so is now. And so I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member and all of my colleagues for yielding time today to allow me to make this statement in support of my bill. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congressman Butterfield. And with that, Congressman Gibson, you are now next, and you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking you, Mr. Chairman, the ranking member, all the distinguished members of the committee. And as a veteran myself, I greatly appreciate all these bills that I've heard from this morning that are going to make a difference. And I appreciate the opportunity to come before the committee to discuss H.R. 1494, the Blue Water Navy Ship Accountability Act, an important bill designed to help our Blue Water Navy Vietnam veterans. During the Vietnam War, our government sprayed 20 million gallons of herbicide Agent Orange to remove jungle foliage from the Vietnam terrain. Agent Orange contains dioxin, a toxic chemical residue found in locations where Agent Orange was used or stored. The U.S. government has since linked dioxin to harmful or serious medical conditions affecting those who served in or around Vietnam, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, prostate and other cancers, type 2 diabetes, and Parkinson's disease. Recognizing the debt owed to veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange, Congress passed and President George H.W. Bush signed into law the Agent Orange Act of 1991. The 1991 law empowered the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to declare certain illnesses to be presumed to have been caused by exposure to Agent Orange and enabled Vietnam veterans to receive disability compensation for related conditions. However, in 2002, the VA limited the scope of these presumptive illnesses covered within the Act to only those veterans who could provide proof that they had boots on the ground in Vietnam. Boots on the ground encompassed land forces and the riverine, or as commonly called, the Brown Water Navy. As a result, veterans who served in the waters off the coast of Vietnam, commonly called blue water veterans, were forced to file individual claims with the VA to restore their benefits. The VA has denied almost 33,000 such claims since 2009. Under current law, Blue Water Navy veterans who do not set foot in Vietnam or serve aboard ships that operated in the inland waterways of Vietnam between January 9, 1962 and May 7, 1975 have the burden of proof to demonstrate exposure to Agent Orange and the connection to their illnesses. These claims are decided on a case-by-case basis. The Bureau of Veteran Affairs maintains a list of U.S. Navy and Coast Guard ships that operated within the vicinity of Vietnam. Some offshore vessels docked to the shore of Vietnam operated in Vietnam's close coastal waters and sent smaller vessels ashore or conducted operations in the inland waterways of Vietnam. Current VA policy for when a veteran files an Agent Orange exposure-related claim requires the VA regional offices to forward a request for that request to the Department of Defense's Army and Joint Services Records Research Center, and evidence confirmed through military records must show that the veteran was aboard one of these ships that operated close to or an insurer in order to receive benefits. However, this list is imperfect and it's not comprehensive. Our Vietnam veterans should not be made to wait any longer than necessary to receive their benefits. My bill would direct the JSRRC to do a comprehensive search to determine which ships are eligible for coverage under current law, reducing the wait time when new claims are filed. This would help veterans who are currently sick or, in some cases, have died and claims are being made by their surviving families. Passage of this bill will alleviate some of the current VA claims backlog our veterans are facing by proactively determining what we know today rather than wait until tomorrow when claims are made. In closing, I would like to also to point out that the Congressional Budget Office has indicated that H.R. 1494 will have no significant cost, and the bill enjoys support of major veterans organizations such as the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign War, the Military Officers Association of America, the Military Coalition, the Vietnam Veterans Association, the Association of the U.S. Navy, and the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Association. It researches available documents to determine who is eligible under current law to receive presumptive coverage for exposure to Agent Orange. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the ranking member, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Gibson. And I know Congressman McCarthy is probably on his way, but so we'll continue to move forward. And also, in the interest of time, we'll forego any questions of this panel. If you do have any questions, please submit them for the record. So on behalf of the subcommittee, I want to thank you for your testimony, and you are now excused, and I'll ask the second panel to come forward. With this panel, first we will hear from Verna Jones, Director of Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation Commission at the American Legion. Next, we will hear from Alexander Nicholson, who's the Legislative Director for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. And then we'll hear from Heather Ainsley, Vice President of Veterans Policy with Vets First. Thank you all for being here today. All of your statements will be entered into the record. And Ms. Jones, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of this committee. Thank you for inviting the American Legion here this afternoon to express our views on legislation being considered today. A lot of these bills are created with the intent of helping deal with the backlog, and that's important. We have to do something about it, and I want to talk about that today. See, I started out as a Department Service Officer in North Carolina helping veterans. And for our service officers and the over 2,600 accredited representatives of the American Legion across the nation, we deal with veterans every day who come into our office asking for help dealing with the disabilities they acquired serving their country. We see their faces, we know their stories, we feel their pain. And it's easy to put a face with a problem when you have that in your office every day. I've had the opportunity since then to serve in various capacities helping veterans, and now I'm the director of a division of the American Legion that serves veterans across the country, whether it's helping them with their disability claims, to get benefits, or their health care. But I keep the faces of those veterans in my heart every day. I remember the very first veteran that I helped as a young service officer. He came into my office, and we were going to go before a decision review officer because he had been denied. He was a early 30-year-old man, and what I saw before me was a man who looked twice that age because of his disability from serving his country. As we went in front of the decision review officer, he started to tell his story. He talked about while serving his country, he developed an illness, and now he couldn't play with his children or dance with his wife or do the things that he thought a man should do for his family. He was unable to work. He had to quit work because his disability was so severe and it became dangerous for him to work. And as he told his story, I became emotional. I couldn't believe the person had endured such hardship. He stopped talking to the DSO and said to me, "Don't cry for me. Feel happy for me. Feel honored that I was able to serve my country. And knowing what I know now, if I had to do it all over again, I'd still serve my country." The doctor had told him 2 years prior to that in 5 years he would either be severely disabled or dead, and he died 2 years later before his benefits were awarded. That's what I want you all to keep in mind as you consider every bill that comes before you. Think of the faces and the names of the people you know who served, and keep them in mind and ask, are we doing the right thing for them? Some answers and decisions are so easy. H.R. 1494, the Blue Water Navy Ship Accountability Act. It's long past time that we had a comprehensive list showing which ships did what in Vietnam. Let's get this done and make things easier for those Vietnam veterans and for the VA as they work on those claims. H.R. 2086, the Pay-As-You-Rate Act, just helps the VA raters do what they're already allowed to do, but may not receive credit for it, and get some good news to the veteran and grant some of their issues, even if the others are going to take a little while longer. Let's get some help and some money flowing in the homes of those veterans while they wait for the VA to rate the rest of their claim to get it done right. Other bills like H.R. 1623, H.R. 1809 are going to provide more information to the interested stakeholder about the VA, how the VA is accomplishing their goal. More information to the veterans about their options for filing a claim. These things are only going to make the system run better, more transparently and more efficiently. The American Legion has been heavily involved in working through the fully developed claims process. We've traveled the country providing quality review visits and looking at the quality of those FDC claims, and it's helping veterans. It helps the veterans, it helps the VA get the information that they need up front, and a veteran can help cut off months of their claim processing time. We're already doing this in offices across the country, and I'll tell you, from our time there, it's working. We need to get the word out to the veterans through H.R. 8, and H.R. 1809 is going to help us do that. We're all here because we want to help veterans, whether it's you in those chairs, whether it's the American Legion or other VSOs, or people here listening to us. We all want to help the veteran. We're here because we want to get them some help and get the claims done right. Getting more information, more data out of the VA about how that process is going is only going to help all of the stakeholders in the process and make the right decisions about how to help veterans. It's going to help the veterans themselves make the right decisions about how to use the process to get their claims done promptly and accurately. Again, I'd like to thank the committee for considering these bills and for working hard to make sure that they are helping to guide the system and to make it work for veterans. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And with that, I will now recognize Mr. Nicholson for his testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Titus, good seeing you, Mr. Chairman, as well. Other distinguished members of the committee, thanks for having us here. On behalf of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and our 270,000 members and supporters, we are grateful for the opportunity to offer our views and recommendations regarding these pieces of legislation before the subcommittee today. As of this week, there are more than 800,000 claims pending before the VA, over 500,000 of which are still backlogged. But those who find themselves in need of benefits and care from the VA are more than just numbers. Each number represents a face, a person, a family, and a story. And to help bring these stories to light before Congress, the media, and the American public, IEVA this week has launched a new digital tool called The Weight We Carry, which can be accessed and explored at theweightwecarry.org. And we would encourage each of you and your staff to take a moment to look at this enlightening data visualization tool and use it to find real stories of real constituents from your states and your communities who are or were stuck in the backlog. IEVA believes that all veterans must have access to quality benefits, care, and related services. The men and women who volunteer to serve in our nation's military do so with the explicit understanding that they and their families will be cared for during their period of service and also after their period of service should they sustain injuries or disability while serving. IEVA is therefore proud to offer our support for many of the bills pending before this subcommittee and that are the subject of this hearing today. I want to mention just a couple of bills in my oral remarks today and focus on those. Because as many of you know, IAVA's #1 issue this year has been the backlog. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention the chairman's bill. The Disabled Veterans Access to Medical Exams Improvement Act is one that we strongly support because we believe that the extension of this authority is smart. We believe it is a proven tool that the VA can use to help it get through more claims quicker and more efficiently. And we would even encourage the committee to look at an extension of the ability of regional offices to use this authority beyond the 10 or even the 15 that this would extend it to potentially all regional offices. Also wanted to mention Representative McCarthy's bill briefly, the Ending VA Disability or Claims Disability Backlog and Accountability Act. We have certainly had some concerns about the depth and substance behind the VA's backlog strategic plan, and we believe that this bill seeks to address some of those shortcomings that we and other VSOs have identified and have shared our concerns about for quite some time. But I want to focus mostly now on Chairman Miller's bill to establish a commission or task force to evaluate the underlying causes of the VA disability claims backlog. The existence and work of this task force would in no way impede the ongoing work of the VA to address problems that have already been identified. And it would simply not just study the matter from afar and issue a report years later. Instead, the chairman has smartly and carefully crafted this bill to ensure that the task force would augment and support the VA's ongoing work, contribute more added value to this effort, report on its findings early and often, and increase transparency throughout the process. The VA is certainly already working to address some of these issues and the confidence deficit that has resulted through these reforms, such as moving to an all-electronic filing system, increasing access to information, increasing staffing bandwidth and training, coordinating better with other elements within the VA, and communicating more efficiently and effectively with DoD and other executive agencies. All of these are welcome reforms, but even the VA admits that there are still snags and challenges with which it needs help. The formation and existence of such a task force would facilitate getting the VA that coordination and outside help, and would also be an important facilitator of looking ahead to potential future challenges so that we do not wind up in this unfortunate situation again, Mr. Chairman. IAVA strongly supports this bill and stresses again that it would in no way impede the good work in progress that the VA is already making on the backlog. Instead, the resulting task force would only help speed up that process and get the VA the information, resources, and expertise it needs to meet its goals. That is, after all, the common goal of IAVA, other military and veteran service organizations, this committee, and the VA itself. Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude there and thank you again for this opportunity to offer our views before the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. And with that, I'll recognize Ms. Hainsley for her testimony.
Chairman Runyon, Ranking Member Titus, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Vets First to share our views today regarding the bills that are the subject of the hearing. My full testimony has been submitted for the record, and I will now limit my comments to just a few of the bills that are before us today. First, we support H.R. 1623. This legislation would require VA to provide information regarding the processing times of claims by regional office and by medical condition. Although we support this legislation, we believe that the information collected by condition would be more useful if it included processing times for individual medical conditions by regional office, and also for those medical conditions for which most veterans seek compensation. Second, we support H.R. 1809. This legislation would require VA to provide veterans with information about processing times and claims for which benefits are awarded. We believe that providing veterans with the information they need to make informed decisions about their benefits claims is vital. We do have concerns, however, about the need to acknowledge receipt of information as part of submitting a claim for benefits. Third, we support H.R. 2086. This legislation would require VA to make interim payments of disability benefits when an issue is favorably decided for the veteran. We again urge swift passage of this legislation. Fourth, we support the intent of H.R. 2138. This legislation would require VA to fully implement its strategic plan for the elimination of the claims backlog. To ensure that the goal is met, VA would be required to develop a supplemental report that includes additional metrics and timelines for implementing that plan, and also accountability from the outside. Vets First believes that VA must be held accountable for meeting the goal of processing initial claims within 125 days at 98% accuracy. Thus, we believe that requiring a continuing evaluations of metrics will show if progress is being made and will be helpful in ensuring that VA is pursuing correct policies and procedures and making any course corrections that are needed along the way. We also believe, however, that the reporting requirements must be carefully monitored to ensure that the information that's being collected is actually needed to facilitate and is not diverting critical resources. Fifth, HR 2189 would create a task force or commission to study the claims backlog. We are concerned that a commission or task force might hinder VA's current efforts by diverting resources from the overall push to address the backlog. However, VA must be held accountable for meeting its goal. We do believe that a commission or task force that is narrowly focused on VA's current efforts related to the backlog would have benefit for veterans and the claims process. We also believe, however, that there is a need for a more broad-based commission or task force that would thoroughly evaluate the entire claims process, including the appeals process. Thus, we believe that a task force or commission should focus on either a backlog of the initial claims or the broader claims process, including the appeals, but not necessarily both. We would ask that either the task force the legislation that's been proposed be limited in scope, or that the timeframes and focus be broadened to include the many areas of concern. Sixth, we support HR 2382. This legislation would require the Secretary to provide priority for veterans who are age 70, terminally ill, or who have life-threatening illnesses. We strongly believe that statutory protections for our most vulnerable veterans are necessary to ensure that benefits are available for those with heightened needs. We would suggest, however, that this legislation be amended to include those veterans who are homeless or who are suffering severe financial hardship. Seventh, we support HR 2423. This legislation would extend VA's authorization to use contract physicians to perform examinations for compensation exams. And we support this legislation because it would not only extend VA's authority, but would also allow VA to move resources to where they are most needed. Again, we thank you for the opportunity to share our views today. This concludes my testimony, and we would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ainsley. And with that, I'll begin the first round of questions. And my first question is for Mr. Nicholson. You touched on it a little bit in your statement dealing with HR 2430, or excuse me, 2423. Obviously, the being able to expand the ROs up to 15, I think you commented on that. Is there anything else specifically dealing with contract examinations we could do to help the process that you could think of?
Not off the top of my head, Mr. Chairman. I would just stress the fact that the reason that I believe, we've evaluated the fact that expansion from 10 to 15 and even perhaps beyond would be a good idea is because, one of the things we saw when the VA did its special claims processing initiative on 2-year and older claims was that one of the factors that helped it get through so many claims that were so old in such a small amount of time that had languished for years was increasing the capacity essentially increasing the capacity of the Veterans Health Administration to tackle comp and pen exams. We heard that they were scheduling those in evenings and weekends, that they were really stepping up their coordination between with VBA that is, with VHA to get those comp and pen exams done. So that's why we think that anything that would further increase the capacity of VHA to get to and complete these comp and pen exams would drastically help with the backlog issue. And I think that is one of the things that sort of goes to show that and has proven that outside of the effectiveness of the pilot study with the 10 regional offices already.
Thanks. And now on HR 2189, we know that IAVA led the charge in calling for the independent commission or task force to evaluate the current situation surrounding the backlog claims. Can you elaborate on how your organization how you arrived at the conclusion that this was necessary and why you continue to believe it is the best path forward?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think the fundamental point behind why we decided to push so hard on the commission or task force to tackle the backlog issue is because, we've been dealing with promises on the backlog and on many other issues from the VA for decades. We have seen an exponential explosion in the number of claims, for example, that are older than 1 year old, 2,000% in a 4 or 5 year period. We think it just rises to the level of a crisis. And, you know, while we certainly have faith in, to an extent, and trust and are optimistic that the VA's leaders are moving in the right direction, there certainly has been some positive progress lately. We certainly encourage and applaud and acknowledge and recognize that. But there has been progress in the past that has slipped back to where we are today. Another fundamental reason, Mr. Chairman, is because this problem is not just within the VA. It's currently being handled, you know, just within the VA. This problem, though, I think the VA will tell you itself, is largely dependent upon cooperation from other agencies, especially the Department of Defense, to get records, not only for active duty, but especially for Guard and Reserve members. It's dependent on the Social Security Administration, and there are lessons to be learned from outside of the government itself. I think the roundtable that Chairman Miller held a couple of weeks ago with industry experts from the insurance field, as well as some tech industry experts, was enormously helpful for the VA. I think the folks from the VHA who were here, from the VBA, excuse me, who were here participating in that, found that to be enormously helpful. And that's what this would do. A commission or task force would bring together not only members from representatives from other government agencies, but from outside of the government, expertise from the tech industry, from the insurance industry, et cetera, to assist the VA, but not only solve the current backlog crisis, but make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's one of the reasons we've been pushing for this so hard. We think the VA needs the help.
Thank you. I actually have a couple more questions, but I'll try to get that in the second round and recognize Ms. Titus for her questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say that I appreciate Ms. Ainsley's comments about HR 2189 and the need to look at the appeals process. In a recent hearing, I asked the question, aren't we going to be facing a backlog with appeals as well as a backlog with claims, especially as these claims are resolved? That's likely to get worse. And the response was yes, but when I asked what we were doing about it, they didn't have very many specifics. So I think you're right that the commission needs to address both of those things. My other question, and it really is just kind of an elaboration on a point that was made, was to Ms. Jones. You said in reference to the bill HR 2086 that I introduced, pay-as-you-rate, that this would put in legislation something that they're already doing but aren't getting rewarded for. Now, they have the authority to make interim payments, but I would ask you just how often that really occurs, and if employees aren't getting credit for that because it's not a case being resolved, there's really no incentive for them to do it, how can we change that process so they can get credit, or that we do make sure that it's happening?
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we conduct quality review visits and along with the fully developed claim visits. Part of that process, we talk to employees and we ask them questions about the work credit system and some claims that they would rather rate and how they just go about day-to-day business. And from so many of those employees, we hear that if they can have, for instance, a 4-issue claim and they can't rate all 4 of those issues, it's not likely that they're going to rate 1 issue and defer 4. So I think that one of the ways that we could help make sure that doesn't happen is through the work credit system, kind of revamp the work credit system. Almost every employee that we ask across the nation, all the ROs, we ask them if they think the work credit system is fair. Most people don't think that it's productive. They think it's counterproductive to what they are doing. So I think to relook at the work credit system and make it more conducive to being able to rate those claims and to do what the Pay-As-You-Rate Act supports, to rate a claim, get some money going to those veterans, and defer the other ones until they can come back and properly rate those claims.
So will you work with us to help us look at revamping that work credit system?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. And we've been joined by Congressman McCarthy, and I'd like to recognize him for 5 minutes to speak on his bill, H.R. 2138.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing today and providing me the opportunity to testify in support of H.R. 2138, the Ending VA Claims Disability Backlog and Accountability Act. Every day, the brave men and women of our armed forces risk their lives to preserve our freedom and the American way of life. We must honor those who have served when they are in need, and that is why Congress has continued to increase VA funding, an uncommon occurrence in today's fiscal climate. Yet the VA continues to fail when the needs of our veterans. With increasing frequency, frustrated veterans I represent complain to me about waiting months, even years for a decision on their disability claims. Even more frustrating is that when my own inquiries to the VA of these cases are mostly ignored. So I appreciate the help of this committee for working with me to request the GAO audit to seek answers for our veterans. The GAO audit confirmed our veterans' worst complaints, that the VA is not processing disability claims in a timely manner. Immediately, Chairman Miller and I called on the Veterans Affairs Secretary to take swift action to implement the GAO recommendations to help our veterans. Unfortunately, what this committee allowed me to question VA Undersecretary for Benefits, Allison Hickey, during a hearing, instead of acknowledging the problems identified by the GAO, she rejected many of the audit's findings. As I have repeatedly said, if the VA refuses to help our veterans, the House would. Today's hearing on H.R. 2138 and the Chairman's bill, H.R. 2189, and others is keeping that promise to our veterans and is another step in holding the VA accountable. My bill addresses the GAO identified factors that contribute to the lengthy processing times of disability claims, improves congressional oversight of the VA's effort to reduce the backlog, and requires the VA to end the backlog by Memorial Day 2015. The bottom line is the current system is failing our veterans, the very men and women who have served our country, and we know we can do better. We must end the backlog. I'm confident that the legislation being considered today will help in this effort. That's why I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all of your effort. I know this issue is a bipartisan issue, and we want to solve it together to make sure our veterans have all that they need. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his testimony, and we will resume, and you're welcome to leave, Congressman McCarthy, if you want.
I thought you liked me.
We do. But your colleagues left earlier, so we kept that seat warm for you.
Well, you all have a nice 4th.
Thank you. And resume the round of question with Ms. Nugget McLeod. You have no questions? I actually have 2 more for this panel. Ms. Ainsley, dealing with H.R. 2382. Could you think of, you brought up the homeless veterans to the list. Can you think of any more categories that we might have to consider in this piece of legislation?
Well, I think there's always a danger of adding so many that no one becomes priority again. But I think that at least bringing in the groups that that VBA says it's already giving priority to, and also looking at what the Board of Veterans Appeals does, which is to include the financial hardship. So I think that those are cases that would at least be a good point to start with, and perhaps then even requiring a look back to see how does that process work with those that are being given priority. Are they moving more quickly? And then are there other categories that we could add? So I think we can start with what we already know is supposed to be working, whether it's at Board of Veterans Appeals or whether it's what VA is already prioritizing, and then go from there.
Thank you. And I kind of have a different, not a different type of question, but I'm going to put you all on the spot. Obviously, we have a lot of legislative ideas in front of us today, and they're aimed at reducing and ultimately eliminating the backlog. Which one of the ideas in front of us today do you think will be the most effective in obtaining or achieving this goal? Ms. Ainsley? And you don't have to say my piece.
Well, you just stole what I was going to say, Chairman. No, I think that there are many wonderful things here that could be done. I think accountability is probably one of the most important. I know you asked us for the most important, but I would have to say it's a 2-part issue. It's accountability for VA and making sure that they are reaching their goal of meeting the backlog, but also making sure that our veterans have the information that they need to make informed and educated decisions. That's something that my organization in particular is really promoting, is making sure veterans have what they need. So I think that just as there's no one silver bullet that's going to address any of these issues, I think that looking at the most important thing is what do our veterans need and what does VA need, and it's accountability and information.
Mr. Nicholson, you want to take a shot at it?
I'd love to, Mr. Chairman. I think it really depends on sort of what our goal is here. I mean, if our goal is to continue to try to put Band-Aids on the issue, and maybe that's a rather crude way of characterizing it, but fix the small problems along the way, then, I would say there are some that actually do accomplish that goal, that do fix problems that have been identified and that need fixing. For example, like I mentioned earlier, your bill, which would add capacity for VHA to get to comp and pen claims so that VBA can get those claims adjudicated quicker, I think would be extremely helpful. The Pay-As-You-Rate Act as well would get vets money quicker, and then more time can be taken on the other parts that require more analysis. But if we want a more comprehensive solution that's going to go beyond just the quick fixes, and try to look at how we can solve this problem comprehensively and fundamentally for the long term as well as the short term, then I would say the Chairman's Commission bill is going to go that entire way in doing that.
Thank you. Ms. Jones.
Thank you. They're all very important because they all tend to fix or to help eliminate the backlog. If I had to choose right now, 1809, because 1809 gives the veteran better information, and it talks about, it helps them recognize the benefits of the fully developed claims. I've talked about that a little bit today because we've been heavily involved in that. We've had the opportunity to go around and to look to see what the service officers are giving to the VA and then what the VA is doing with that information. Throughout our quality review visits, we've been able to talk about the FAST letters and the directives that have been put out to the VA employees and make suggestions and have them understand a little bit better what's supposed to be done with that information. Veterans are getting paid more quickly through the FDC program. We've seen claims that have been adjudicated in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 115 days, and that's a lot better than the traditional claims process. And it gives the veteran an opportunity to take an active part in getting their claim through the system. Give the VA exactly what they need, get those claims back awarded quickly to the veteran so they can move on, have a better quality of life, get the health care that they deserve, the benefits that they've earned, and not have it take so long. It also helps the VA continue to move on more quickly with the claims that don't fall under the fully developed claims guidelines. So 1809 is a very important piece of legislation today.
Thank you. And any other members have any other questions? No. Well, with that, thank you all for your testimony, and you are now excused, and I'll ask the third panel to come forward. On this panel, we will hear from Mr. Thomas Murphy, the Director of Compensation Service with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. He is accompanied by Mr. Richard Hippolyte, the Assistant General Counsel with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. I want to note that because this hearing came together in short order and contains a large number of bills, VA's written testimony was unable to be cleared by OMB in time for today's hearing. I want to emphasize that I appreciate VA's willingness to be here today, despite the fact that the agency's clear views are not yet available. They will be submitted for the record next week. Accordingly, I want to make sure that we are all clear that although VA will not be presenting oral remarks at today's hearing, they are here to answer any technical questions to the bills on the agenda today. Any more substantive questions may be submitted for the record once VA has cleared the written testimony. This will be made available. I'd like to thank again Mr. Murphy and Mr. Hippolyte for being here today, and I will begin with some questions as soon as I find them. Yeah, I don't see the tab. Where's that? There it is. A lot of bills, a lot of tabs. This goes back, kind of, it's a question on HR 2382, would legislate certain priority groups for claims processing, including elderly and terminally ill veterans. In addition to these veterans, what type of veterans does the VA currently try to prioritize for claims processing?
The current priorities we have, priority group number 1 is Medal of Honor recipients, homeless veterans, extreme financial hardships, terminally ill, and a couple others that I can't recall off the top of my head. But the point is, many of the priorities that are called out in this bill, those veterans are already in priority group 1. And just let me put a little clarity around what exactly that means. We're in a major push with the 2-year initiatives, the 1-year initiative that's ongoing right now. These claims in this category have priority over even that work that comes in. So these are the first cases that are worked before we even go into the backlog issues of 1-year and 2-year claims.
Is it uniformly applied across all the ROs?
I can't sit here and tell you that I guarantee that 100% of the time it's complied at all times. We are still in a manual/automated process. And as we complete the fielding and moving all claims into that, then I'll be able to answer that question with certainty.
Can you generally discuss how the contract examination process works at the 10 regional offices where it's currently in place?
Yeah, we're talking the contract exams conducted by our well, it's one contractor, two contractors, excuse me. Yes, as an exam is determined, the need in order to complete under the regulations and the law, we determine an exam is needed. And we have at the regional office, we have the option of going down the route of one of our suppliers or to BHA, depending on which is most expeditious. And there's also some ties back into the IDIS process with that as well. It's done direct from VBA's development, VSR, to that contractor through our electronic systems. The exam is ordered and then returned back directly to us. And we measure those for timeliness, for quality, accuracy, et cetera.
And you find the use of contract examinations helpful?
Yes. Yes, it's very helpful to us.
And this is kind of we had a veteran recently contacted the committee and noted that he served on the USS William Pratt during during Vietnam War. The gentleman noted that his ship, as well as the USS, what was it, Halsey, had been submitted to the VA to be listed as the ships that operated in the territorial waters of the Republic of Vietnam. And he wanted to know what the process is and how that request gets moved along to confirmation. So you could walk us through how the VA goes determining whether a particular Navy ship from the Vietnam era served in blue water, brown water. Can you walk us through that process?
There's a process by which we determine did that ship enter into the brown water up the rivers and main water streams, or did it come in and actually dock or send barges in with sailors on board those. In that process, we contact JESRIC. We give them a specific window measured in months and a time frame in that, and JESRIC will go in and then do research on the deck logs and other information in their possession and come back to us and confirm yes or no, was that ship in that location at that time. Once we receive that information, if it's confirmed that a particular ship was there, we document it and maintain it on a list on a website and make that available to all raters so that we don't have to go out and repeat that research the next time another veteran from that ship comes in. So we're capturing it. It's not a complete list by any means of all ships in the Navy during the duration of the war, explaining when those ships were or were not on. And we're being as wide as we can in our proof. We're using, for example, this sailor that you're talking about, if we had pictures of those that actually went ashore on a barge and it shows them in Saigon Harbor, we use that to develop and ask the right questions and record that that ship was in fact, or the sailors on that ship were in fact exposed to Agent Orange on land in Vietnam. So, and then we capture that, record that for use later.
Thank you, and I will now yield to the ranking member, Ms. Titus, for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Murphy, you said recently in a news story that the VA was at a tipping point in regard to eliminating the backlog, and I think the VA is certainly doing a good job and making progress, so I commend y'all for that. You also said that you should have the backlog completely addressed by the end of, or by 2015. Now, Mr. McCarthy's bill, H.R. 2138, wants it to be completed by Memorial Day 2015. That's 7 months ahead of the end of the year. How do you feel about that? Is that possible to do that 7 months ahead, or at what point in 2015 did you mean when you said you could have it done by then?
I would have to stick with by 2015.
So that would be by January 2015?
That would be, let me rephrase that. I would have to stick with in 2015.
So in 2015 means by Memorial Day?
I'm sorry?
Could you do it by Memorial Day then?
We are putting every effort we've got. Our prime focus has got nothing. Everything we do is targeted at reducing the backlog. Every effort, every dollar we spend is 125 days, 98% in 2015.
I know that, and I appreciate that. I'm just concerned that in 2015, if you do it by Memorial Day, that cuts off 7 months of 2015, and I don't know if you can get it done by then.
I don't know if we can either, and that's why I'm saying that in 2015, we will fix the backlog.
Okay. My other question is going back to Ms. Jones' statement about the work credit system. The VA can do interim payments, but they're reluctant to do that because the employees don't get any work credit for that. Can you work with us now, or you commit to working with us to revising that system so that that will be an incentive for people to get claims done, or is that a problem for the VA?
That's a very complex question to a very complex situation in that.
Well, how about just a simple answer to a complex question? Yes or no?
Yes, we would be happy to work with you on exactly how we could look at and restructure the point system for how we award points for work, and with the intent being, how do you incentivize employees to work better, perform better, be more efficient? And we're obviously putting efforts into that today, even beyond what we're looking at here or what's in the bill and in the language in here. What we do need to keep in mind that we're in the middle of this tipping point we're talking about has got much to do with the fact that we're operating in two worlds, paper environment and electronic environment, and that the scales are tipping very rapidly, that we'll be very much in the electronic world and very few in the paper world. And as that automation rolls out and develops further, we get much more ability and much more clarity that we can look at and drive accountability and performance with our management, with our leadership, with our individual employees, and place those right kind of incentives that you're talking about here.
So it's a little too early to measure or come up with new sets of metrics, as everybody likes to talk about now, for performance with the new system. Is that kind of?
And the general scope with the bill, as I read it here, the concept goes in the direction we're already planning for and taking things to do. And I think you said it best when you said it might be just a little bit too early for that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No more questions? Okay. I guess on behalf of the subcommittee, I'd like to thank you for your testimony. Look forward to working with you and working with you as your official positions become available to us, and you are now all excused. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Thank the members for their attendance today, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.